All right, so let's remember where we are in China before looking at Mao's China. So after World War II, where China had a unified front, where the communists and nationalists had put aside their differences to fight against the Japanese, and the Allies win the war, which China was on the side of. The communists win the Civil War, and the nationalists flee, led by Chiang Kai-shek, to Taiwan. So what is left in mainland China at this point? Mao and the communist government. The communist government is still in power today. Mao obviously is not, but Mao is your start of this. And he brings in what we call Maoism. Maoism is basically the fact that you're going to have it isn't the urban proletariat like you had seen in the Soviet Union or, yeah, the Soviet Union. No, it's the rural peasants that are at the heart of the revolution. And that's what Mao really is going for this whole time. Now, Mao is an example of basically, different leaders had gotten involved in the Cold War and trying to get China involved. I mean, they'd had an alliance with the Soviet Union for a time that falls apart due to lack of trust and the fact that the Soviets would not give the Chinese a nuclear weapon, which Chinese eventually developed on their own. Excuse me. And so when Mao takes power after 1949, one of the first things he puts in place is he wants to put in place to build this heavy industry. He's going to build up heavy industry. He's going to build up infrastructure. This is much the same as what Stalin did. Well, that's because the relationship had fallen apart in 1955. And he does this with, hey, instead of building things like refrigerators, we are going to build infrastructure. And gradually, over time, economic inequality is basically eliminated in rural villages, and this is part of the help of that. And what then we go to next, even though that heavy industry fails because nobody has any stuff really to buy, is he starts looking and say, okay, we need to go the Great Leap Forward, it's called. And that Great Leap Forward, what's it going to do? Agriculture. Agriculture is going to move us forward, and he's going to redistribute land from rich peasants so that everyone has something, but there's no private ownerships. Farmers could not market crops because the government takes over all grain farming. So at this point, farming and industry are completely collectivism between that first 5-year plan and now the Great Leap Forward. It's not going to work very well. It's going to be bad. Okay. In addition to this, many Chinese family traditions he gets rid of. Now, some of them you could see as positives, like no forced marriages, no child marriages. Women are given access to divorce and abortion rights. Foot binding's gone. I mean, that's things very similar to what we saw in the Soviet Union, where women actually gain more equality under communist governments. Great Leap Forward as a whole is brutal. It's not good farming. The collective farming and the famines that come from it aren't good. Mao blamed the sparrows for bad harvests, so he ordered the peasants to kill them. Peasants eat insects. Sparrows eat insects. Here come the insects. They kill all the crops. Incredibly brutal. 20 million people dead, approximately. I've seen that number higher, and I've seen the lower 20 million is about usually a pretty safe number with it. So Mao is losing power. He's losing power within the Communist Party. His cult of personality is dying slowly but surely. His wife is actually trying to help him stay in power as much as she can. And so what Mao does next is he's going to do what is called the Cultural Revolution. Mao needs to regain control, give more power to the peasants, because the peasants really were forgotten. Those were the people going against him now after the Great Leap Forward. And so Mao starts what he calls the Cultural Revolution, which essentially is, hey, peasants, hey, students, it's time to go against anybody who is the elites, the intellectuals, teachers, anybody who's not of that revolution. He wants to keep that revolutionary fever going. He's going to beat them. He's going to kill them. He's going to jail them. He's going to reteach them over there. You see that little red book over there on the left. That's a book of sayings by Mao. And Mao is taking people out left and right. It's an unstable China. I think if you take out all the smart people, who's left to rule? Oh, Mao's left to rule, and all of Mao's friends are left to rule. But eventually Mao's going to die. Mao's going to die in 1967, and the Cultural Revolution slowly is going to die out with them. Now, Deng Xiaoping wants to keep the revolution going, but he has to recant. And he sees himself as an intellectual and even goes to work in the factories for a little bit, but it's not going to work as a whole. And Deng's revolution is that Mao, who had always been suspicious of foreign capitalist values, Deng is actually going to send students overseas to try to rebuild this professional, intellectual, and managerial elite. And many people are going to schools back in the West, and there's going to be normalized relationship with the U.S. And this is basically done because Mao had killed all the smart people in the Cultural Revolution. Well, something you've learned from other countries so far. Hey, you send people to the West, they're eventually going to want democracy. And that's what happens. In 1989, there's a protest that turned into kind of a revolutionary fever in Tiananmen Square, which is at the heart of Beijing, its capital. Deng is not the leader anymore, and the leader is actually not that important. What's important is the Communist Party sends in tanks to put down this protest, which is not uncommon, but to use the military for China. But this one especially is a sign of force. Hey, get involved with the Communist Party or else get out. And get out might mean we take you out. And so these democracy demonstrations are put down with force. And if you look down in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see a picture. You'll see a picture of what we call Tank Man. Tank Man stands up to the line of tanks that is showing force to try to put down the protests throughout Beijing and pro-democracy protests. And it really is it's not a turning point, but Tank Man, we have no idea what happened to him. He was literally whisked away, never to be heard from again. You could probably go to the fact he's either killed or just won't come out because of the fact he was so controversial. So China, this is really the first point where China has to deal with something. They are more and more becoming part of the global economy and trying to manage how to be a one-party system that has incredible aspects of capitalism in it. And so even then when Hong Kong comes in, which is usually regarded as one of the freest economies of the world, remember they had lost Hong Kong in the Opium Wars. How do you manage this situation where you have a system you have an agreement with Hong Kong that you're not going to mess with them for 50 years, and you're going to have the one city, two systems policy where Hong Kong is one city that's under basically British laws and also Chinese laws, and the mixture of those two things, which don't really mix well together. Those are questions China has to answer here in the 21st century of how they're going to manage things like that. What do you remember from this lecture? First of all, remember Mao's general just thinks, hey, I'm going to start heavy industry, then I'm going to do agriculture. It doesn't work, so I'm going to start killing people with the Cultural Revolution. Then after he's gone, Deng Xiaoping comes in. Hey, we're going to revolutionize. We're going to bring in some foreign capitalist values. Hey, guess what? That's going to lead to some revolts in Tiananmen Square.